how Google Ads work for therapists and why these specific marketing campaigns typically fail.
Right.
And jumping right in, aligning the core narrative structure directly with the title's bold promise transforms a standard tutorial into a compelling diagnostic tool.
Yeah, I mean, when a creator titles a piece Why Most Campaigns Fail, they are making this very specific, implicitly dramatic promise to the audience. They are promising an autopsy of a disaster.
Exactly. And reading through the beginning of this material, it feels a bit like opening a book expecting a forensic murder mystery, but getting a standard anatomy textbook instead.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it.
Because the title promises an explanation of why campaigns die, right? But almost immediately, the material shifts into a chronological, standard setup guide.
Right, you expect to be looking for fingerprints and motives, but instead you are being told, here is the femur, here is the clavicle. This is how you turn on the account.
Yeah, which is highly informative.
It is, but the overarching weakness here is a fundamental mismatch between that hook and the chronological delivery. By structuring the material as a basic how-to guide, where the listener is walked sequentially through setting up keywords, choosing a location, picking a daily budget, the actual high-value insights about failure are buried deep within the tutorial.
They're totally lost.
Exactly. The realization that campaigns bleed money because of missing conversion tracking or mismatched landing pages is entirely stripped of its power. It just becomes another bullet point on a very long setup checklist.
And honestly, the viewer probably clicks away before they even get to the cause of death.
Oh, 100%.
Like, if I'm watching this and the first 10 minutes are just showing me how to pick a geographic radius, I'm thinking, well, I already know how to pick a location. And I close the video before realizing my landing page is fundamentally broken.
Right, so the suggestion here is to restructure the delivery to explicitly frame each technical setup step as a common critical pitfall. Instead of teaching the viewer how to build an ad from scratch in a vacuum, diagnose the common ways people break their ads and then use the setup steps as the cure.
Focus on the pathology first, then offer the medicine.
Precisely.
So let's look at how we might actually execute that with some concrete examples. Like, these are just a few possible ways to solve the problem, but let's start with the keyword section.
Okay.
Instead of introducing broad match keywords as just one of 3 neutral auctions alongside exact and phrase match, you introduce it as failure point number 1.
Bleeding your budget on broad match.
Yes, exactly. Because the source material explicitly points out that if a therapist uses a broad match for anxiety therapy, Google might show their ad to someone searching for how do you cure anxiety or anxiety worksheets.
Yeah, and we have to explain the mechanism here. Google's algorithm for broad match is designed to cast the widest possible net to spend the budget. It looks at semantic relevance, not purchase intent.
Right.
Imagine a user typing, "How to stop panic attacks at night." They are in bed, panicked, looking for a breathing exercise. Broad match triggers your ad for a $200 an hour therapy session.
Which is not what they want at 2 in the morning.
No, they click, realize it costs money, and bounce. He just lost $8. So if you frame broad match as a trapdoor that drains a limited budget on people who will never convert, the viewer instantly understands the financial stakes.
That makes total sense. And we can take that same forensic approach to the landing pages too.
How so?
Well, the material correctly identifies that landing pages need to match the ad perfectly. But what if we used our concrete examples to frame the landing page segment not as a secondary setup step, but as the conversion killer? We explain how this failure happens psychologically.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like a campaign fails because people click an ad specifically for anxiety, but they land on a generic homepage listing couples therapy, depression, and dialectical behavior therapy.
Right, and that psychological disconnect is what kills the conversion. A user clicks the ad because they have a highly specific pain point. When they land on a generic page, their brain has to do extra work to figure out if this therapist actually specializes in their specific problem.
And spoiler alert, they don't do the work.
Exactly, they just click the back button. The therapist pays for a wasted click because they failed to maintain the scent of the search.
Yeah. And building on the causes of campaign death, the material notes that some therapists don't even set up conversion tracking.
Right, which is wild.
To pivot the conversion tracking section from a dry, technical hurdle into a diagnostic warning, we could frame it as the blind spot. This is the #1 reason campaigns never enter a successful machine learning phase.
And we really need to explain why that machine learning phase is so critical to the algorithm. The platform relies on data feedback. When someone clicks an ad and books an appointment, a conversion pixel fires, telling Google, go find more people who share the data profile of this specific person.
Right, and needs that feedback loop.
Without that pixel, Google is effectively flying blind. It's sending traffic based purely on the search term without any feedback loop to tell the algorithm what is actually resulting in new patients.
So suddenly, a boring piece of tracking code isn't just a technical step. It is the ultimate survival tool for the entire campaign.
Completely.
Okay, so once we've reframed these failures and identified the causes of death, we have to organize the cures so the patient or, the viewer doesn't get overwhelmed. Consolidating related technical concepts prevents cognitive overload and keeps the viewer fully engaged in the overarching argument.
Which is a major hurdle when dealing with complex, multi-layered software interfaces like Google Ads. The user interface itself is incredibly fragmented.
Yeah, it really is.
Like Google's setup wizard puts keywords on step 2 and negative keywords on step 6. The creator is essentially just narrating the screen as it appears.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Sure.
The material outlines the foundational concepts of keywords, like broad, exact, and phrase match, very early on. But then it pivots to location targeting, budgets, and landing pages before jumping back into keyword research and negative keywords much later on.
Right.
Is there a risk that consolidating all the keyword information up front might overwhelm a beginner, or does separating it actually cause more confusion later on? Like if we dump everything in the first 5 minutes, aren't we just going to completely overwhelm a beginner who doesn't even fully grasp what a campaign is yet?
It's a fair question, but separating the concepts actually causes more cognitive friction than grouping them. The overarching weakness in this middle section is that the material fragments highly related topics across the transcript.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The foundational concept of keyword match types is discussed in minute 3, but the critical counterpart, negative keywords, like filtering out the word worksheets, is introduced 20 minutes later, almost as a detached bonus thought during the optimization phase.
And it interrupts the flow of understanding. When you bring up negative keywords 20 minutes into the material, the viewer has to pause and try to recall the definition of phrase match and broad match just to understand why negative keywords matter in the first place.
Exactly. They are forced to hold half of a concept in their working memory while learning about daily budgets.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. So the suggestion is to group all keyword-related concepts into a single, cohesive keyword ecosystem segment before moving on to entirely different technical dials like location targeting or landing pages. By clustering related data, the viewer can fully master one conceptual domain before stepping into the next.
Because human cognition works best when we build complete mental models, rather than collecting scattered puzzle pieces and trying to assemble them at the very end.
Exactly.
So let's explore some concrete examples of how this could be executed, keeping in mind there are obviously multiple ways to organize this. One approach is to create a dedicated keyword lifecycle section.
Right.
You start by introducing the Google Keyword Planner to find search terms with mid-range competitiveness. You move immediately into selecting phrase match to protect the budget from being too broad, and then you cap it off in the exact same breath by adding negative keywords to filter out bad intent.
I love that. You're walking them through the complete lifespan of a single concept. You teach the viewer that positive targeting, the search terms you want to capture, and negative targeting, the terms you want to actively block, are two sides of the exact same coin.
Yeah. Using the source materials example, anxiety therapist near me is the positive target, and best worksheets for anxiety is the negative target. Putting those right next to each other creates a very satisfying light bulb moment.
It really does.
They immediately understand that a Google ad is as much about building a wall against bad clicks as it is about opening a door for good ones.
And if you separate the wall and the door by 20 minutes of discussion about daily budgets and geographic radiuses, the metaphor completely falls apart. The viewer loses the strategic overview.
Totally.
We shouldn't let software engineers dictate pedagogical structure. Form must follow function, not the software's user interface. If you understand the keyword ecosystem as a singular, unified concept, you understand how to continually refine it month after month.
But even if you build this perfectly unified keyword ecosystem to stop the bleeding, it won't matter if the person reading the ad doesn't feel understood, which brings us to who this creator is actually talking to.
Right.
Committing entirely to a specific audience niche strengthens authority and prevents the message from feeling diluted.
And audience alignment is often where creators experience the most hesitation. They fear that by being too specific, they are leaving views or potential clients on the table.
Yeah, as I understand it from the notes, the creator has a habit of addressing both therapists and general small business owners. I understand the instinct here. You want your material to reach the widest possible audience, but doesn't throwing a wide net usually mean the message loses its bite for the people who actually need it?
It absolutely does. The weakness we are identifying is that the content frequently wavers between addressing therapists directly and tossing a safety net to other small business owners.
Right.
Every time the material pauses to say, or if you're a small business owner, this applies to you too, it softens the impact of the highly tailored, industry-specific gold mines hidden in the material.
And let's look at those gold mines because they are significant. The text specifically mentions the challenge of remaining HIPAA compliant when setting up conversion tracking.
Huge point.
It also mentions the reality of competing against massive therapy conglomerates like Alma, Headway, and Psychology Today.
Those are incredibly specific pain points. A local bakery owner or a plumber doesn't care about HIPAA compliance, and they certainly aren't competing with BetterHelp.
No, definitely not.
When a therapist hears the creator catering to the plumber, they subconsciously start to question if this strategy is truly sophisticated enough for their specialized medical practice. It dilutes the perceived expertise.
I agree. If I'm a therapist worried about patient confidentiality and the instructor suddenly pivots to talk about plumbing ads, I'm closing the tab immediately. I'm looking for a specialist, not a general practitioner.
Exactly.
The suggestion is to remove the generic small business caveats entirely and lean 100% into the therapist's persona. You must leverage the specific industry knowledge that makes this material unique to build unbreakable trust with your core demographic.
And there are countless ways to niche down. So let's look at some concrete examples of how to execute this.
Okay.
Instead of a generic opening where you say, whether you are a therapist or a small business owner, you start with a highly empathetic, industry-specific pain point. You look directly into the lens and say, as a private practice therapist, your calendar is empty and you're watching massive budgets from Headway and BetterHelp dominate the search results. Here is how we fight back.
Oh, that's so much stronger. You've instantly identified the villain, massive corporate budgets, and positioned the Google ad as the slingshot to take down Goliath. You've proven you understand their daily reality, in a way a generic marketing video never could.
Right. And another concrete example is to expand significantly on the HIPAA compliance point. We mentioned earlier that conversion pixels send data back to Google to fuel the machine learning phase.
Yeah, for a standard e-commerce store selling shoes, that's fine.
Exactly. But for a therapist, sending data about who clicked an ad and subsequently booked a depression consultation can be a massive HIPAA violation if not handled with specialized compliance tools. General small businesses do not have this legal hurdle.
That's a great point.
By making HIPAA compliance the absolute centerpiece of the conversion tracking section, you prove to the viewer that this advice is exclusively built for their unique professional landscape.
It transforms the material from a generic software tutorial into specialized consulting. Like, when the material points out that conversion tracking is tricky because of HIPAA, that should be a massive, flashing neon sign that says, I understand your specific world.
Yes.
If you water that down by quickly moving past it to keep the small business owners engaged, you are throwing away your most valuable asset.
You really are. You want the therapist to feel like they've stumbled into a masterclass designed exclusively for their profession. If they feel like they are sitting in a generic Marketing 101 class at a community college, they will treat the information with much less reverence.
Well, we've covered some incredibly vital ground today. Let's recap the primary insights so the listener can begin applying them immediately.
Sounds good.
Our 3 main actionable takeaways are: first, aligning the material's structure with the failure hook of the title. Stop building a standard setup guide and start treating the setup steps as diagnostic cures for the most common ways people break their campaigns.
Explain the mechanisms behind why broad match bleeds budgets and why missing tracking kills the algorithm.
Right.
Second, consolidating fragmented concepts. Bring all keyword match types, negative keywords, and keyword research into a single unified keyword ecosystem section to prevent cognitive overload. Stop letting the software interface dictate how you teach the strategy.
Absolutely.
And third, cut out the broad audience appeals. Remove the mentions of general small businesses and lean entirely into the specific day-to-day realities of private practice therapists, leveraging things like HIPAA and massive industry competitors to build absolute authority.